Welcome back, everyone. What a great day so far on our Emerging Growth Conference. Our next company is Knightscope. It trades on the NASDAQ under the symbol KSCP and is an advanced security technology company based in Silicon Valley that builds fully autonomous security robots that deter, detect, and report. Knightscope's long-term ambition is to make the United States of America the safest country in the world. Joining us today is the chairman and CEO, Bill Santana Lee of Knightscope, a seasoned entrepreneur, intrapreneur, and former corporate executive at Ford Motor Company. Bill was the founder and COO of Greenleaf, which became the world's second largest automotive recycler, now part of NASDAQ, trading LKQ, and holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Carnegie Mellon University and an MBA from University of Detroit Mercy. Very excited to welcome you, Bill, to our conference today. I believe we're going to start with a video.
Roll it.
Knightscope is making the U.S. the safest country in the world with autonomous robots and cutting-edge technology that innovates public safety and fights crime. Their self-driving robots use machine learning and powerful analytics to collect visual and audio information undetectable by the human eye. The machines allow security personnel to be in multiple locations simultaneously with eyes, ears, and voices on the ground. Their full 360-degree high-definition video streaming and audio recordings expand the scope of security and give users more accurate and secure data that can be stored for up to 30 days. Knightscope robots are designed to provide security levels that allow them to deter, detect, and report security risks. Lights and noise deter criminals in their tracks and prevent a crime before it starts. They can detect 90 terabytes of data per year that no human being can process, and they can report with a text, email, or call to 911 dispatch. The Knightscope K5 model is designed for indoor and outdoor use and can work 24/7 on its own. It's shown results in places like a commercial property where the number of security incidents dropped from 20 per month to 1 for the entire year, where it patrolled 24/7. In another community, elicited confession to a law enforcement agency for 2 burglaries and felony property damage using evidence solely collected by a Knightscope K5. The K5 model was also used to identify a person of interest using the license plate recognition feature in a stolen vehicle incident. Criminals don't care about market volatility, rising interest rates, or supply chain issues. Crime goes on no matter what the economic landscape environment looks like. Knightscope continues to receive millions of dollars of orders even during economic uncertainty and are working through these obstacles to bring their robots to communities all over the country. With their acquisition of Case Emergency Systems, they're expanding their reach and become the go-to technology provider for public safety across the country.
All right. Well, that's fascinating stuff. William, Bill, would you like to start off with a quick little presentation about what's going on? Then we're going to jump right into the Q&A.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about Knightscope. Appreciate you having us here. If you give me a really hard question, I'm just going to turn up the volume behind me, so we'll be all right. The rise of the robots, it's happening, and it's happening now. Knightscope, as shown in the video, we build autonomous security robots. It's a combination of 4 really difficult and important technologies all rolled up into one. So it's autonomy, meaning level 5, completely hands-off, fully autonomous. There's no one remote controlling the robots. Robotics, artificial intelligence, and electric vehicle technology. And the idea is to build new tools to give the 2.5 million officers and guards really smart eyes, ears, and their voice on the ground in multiple locations at the same time, to get us to our long-term, slightly ambitious mission to see if we can make the United States of America the safest country in the world. We have a recurring revenue business model for a recurring societal problem. Crime has a $2 trillion negative economic impact on the U.S. every single year. It's a hidden tax we all pay in blood, tears, and treasure. And as much as I love our country, we've got 200 plus years of history and 46 presidents that haven't not been able to fix the problem. And we need new tools, no different than you would give our brave women and men in uniform on the battlefield. We don't provide those for our officers and guards on our own soil that are willing to get up every morning and take a bullet for you and your family. And it's high time we provide them new tools that we've now shown actually work. the company just we just celebrated our 10th anniversary yesterday. We were told in the beginning like this would never work. Well, go to Knightscope.com/crime and you can see all the positive things that these machines have already done for society. And if you caught our 10K filing last week, we had some impressive news where we ended 2021 with about 3.4 million top line revenue. We grew that significantly, double-digit growth of north of 60%. Ended last year at 5.6 million. And probably more as intriguing, our new order backlog has now ballooned to north of $5.2 million. So we have almost the amount of backlog that we have had for the entire revenue of last year. So obviously we've hit a positive point of continued growth, and we're excited to be here with you to talk about all things Knightscope.
Well, I'm sure our audience is much more educated than the general public's view of robots when we think of Short Circuit and R2-D2, the sweet ones, or kind of the more scary ones, and iRobot and Chappie and stuff like that. So let's just dive right in. Are robots coming to take all of our jobs and kill us, Bill?
We work for Big Brother. That's the assignment we got. Just kidding. The robots aren't coming. They're already here. We've now operated more than 2 million hours across the country in hospitals, in casinos, for law enforcement agencies, commercial real estate, corporate campuses. You might have seen some of the announcements recently where Lowe's, major publicly traded company, PG&E, major public utility, ABM, major facilities provider, all publicly traded, are now using our technology. So the technology's here, but it's going to do a lot more good than 30 years of Hollywood telling everyone that the world's ending and the robots are going to come and kill everyone.
Right. Well, yes, there's a fear of robots taking over the world, but what the real problem is crime. Let's talk about that. How do these robots help with safety? Talk about the positive aspects of this, the solution.
Yeah, we're off camera, and I was kind of half joking. You look at the crime statistics, and you've got a violent crime occurring every 26 seconds, a property crime every 4 seconds, and everyone's all worried about the AI and the robots. And I'm like, yeah, honestly, where I sit, I kind of worry about the humans. But what these are able to do is, as I mentioned, provide eyes, ears, and voice on the ground for the officers to have an additional physical deterrence to just stop the negative behavior in the first place. So think of it as if you put a police car in front of your home or your office, criminal behavior will change. You've got a 5-foot-tall, 400-pound machine roaming around on its own. There's no one remote controlling it. The strobe light's going. It says police or security on the side of it. Likely that crime of passion is going to go away. We had one healthcare client that was experiencing a violent crime twice a week: stolen car, assault, theft, you name it. And we're proud to announce that they just renewed their 7th year contract. So I think we've been able to have a positive impact. We've helped another law enforcement agency help issue an arrest for a sexual predator. We helped another law enforcement agency apprehend an armed gunman, and the list goes on. And we're just getting started.
Well, and these robots are also collecting data. So talk about what the purpose of that, and then how can you prevent a hacker from taking control of the device and taking the data?
So 90 machines generate over 90 terabytes of data a year. Like, no human's going to be able to process that. So we put that in a user-friendly interface that an officer or 911 dispatch or security operations center can utilize. On the hacker side of things, frankly, everything is quote unquote hackable. A few things for us to consider on our side. One, it's machine as a service. So we actually don't sell the hardware outright. It's a subscription. And we have a Knightscope Network Operations Center that manages down to the millisecond every machine across the country. So they're actually in our control. I think second to think about is if we didn't have the basics covered, we likely wouldn't be allowed to patrol a major corporate campus, a public utility, a healthcare facility, or law enforcement agency. Third, I think there's a unique opportunity for us. We've gone through now over 2 years of working through a bit of a nightmare cybersecurity review with the U.S. federal government. And so we're hopeful that this year we'll get our ATO, or authority to operate. And I think that will instill additional confidence in the technology.
And talk about what role AI plays in Knightscope.
Knightscope runs on AI. I know it's trending these days, and everyone's freaking out about the technology. It's how we operate. The machines autonomously on their own decide how to navigate. So I know a lot of people watch a movie and go, "It's a robot. Of course it moves by itself." But doing that is extremely technically very difficult. And to do it completely hands-off, no teleoperation, no remote control, and have the machines be able to operate in dynamic indoor environments like a mall, or outdoors in a 9-story parking structure, and then have the machine decide when it needs to go recharge on its own, how to do the optical character recognition as you read a license plate, how to detect a person, how to do the facial recognition. All that is AI, and that's not pie in the sky R&D stuff. This is stuff that we've had actually out in the field operating, generating millions of dollars of revenue.
And is it utilizing Chat GPT?
So I think there's some internal opportunities for us to optimize our code. I couldn't be more excited about what's happening on the AI frontier to accelerate giving humans superhuman capabilities. I think this is going to be a massive benefit for society in total. I think longer term, either we get to, maybe it's not 5G or 6G, maybe it's 6G in terms of cellular, and then the next 1 or 2 versions of GPT that can go faster. We can get that latency fixed, so the humans can then speak to our robots in a natural conversation like we're having right now. It's technically doable today. It's a little awkward because you've got too much lag time of it going up to the cloud, coming back down, GPT having to process, but that's basically just the latency issue. So we're excited to, over the long term, have all our machines, now that we have, through our acquisition of Case Emergency Systems, more than 7,000 devices across the country. If we can get all of them to see, feel, hear, smell, and speak, and do 100 times more than a human could ever possibly do, it's going to be an exciting time for law enforcement and physical security and public safety.
Fascinating. So currently the robots do not speak, but that is in the near future.
They don't have a two-way conversation. An officer can speak through a machine and have a human-to-human dialogue. There are pre-recorded announcements that the machines can say, "Hey, it's 2 a.m. You're trespassing. I'm calling, law enforcement." For it's a healthcare facility, you can put out, kind of safety kind of things. But those are kind of mostly pre-recorded. We did play around with doing that, but as I mentioned, the technology needs a little bit more work before it's ready for prime time.
Well, this groundbreaking technology with robots and with AI. So what do you think about the government's involvement with this? Should there be a regulatory body overseeing creating some ground rules for this technology? The way I like folks to think about this is, I fear AI. I'm scared of AI. Well, are you scared of electricity? I mean, I've seen and I've heard it can kill people, right? I think we need to change the term fear to respect, right? You would never go stick your finger in the socket, right? Like, you're gonna get a shock. And there is a Department of Energy, and there's a bunch of regulatory bodies that help manage our grid and electricity. There's a Department of Transportation that manages, air, rail, automobiles, and that sort of thing. I think I'm scared that the government doesn't move at the pace of technology, but I think long term there's going to need to put some guardrails on how you go about developing this technology. That does not mean that we shouldn't do it, right? This is extremely powerful,
And it's almost like the human race got a massive upgrade overnight. Like an engineer or a creative person now has 10x capability than they had yesterday. Like that's going to be just mind blowing. Forget the next 10 years. The next 10 months are going to be extremely fascinating. And Knightscope's right at the intersection of that major shift in technology.
Well, you mentioned, Bill, that the company is celebrating their 10 years, but the general public is really just starting to get on the robot bandwagon, if you will. So how are people receiving it? How's the public receiving it, and how are investors receiving it?
Right before the public listing, we had about 35,000 investors back the company, and we're forever grateful to have that support to get to this point. For all the talk of the doom and gloom and the robots and everything else, I mean, honestly, it brings a kid out of everyone. We've got this Robot Roadshow. If you're interested, go to knightscope.com/roadshow. It'll be actually in Times Square in a week or two, and I think in Atlantic City thereafter. We've done 70 stops across the country in a couple of dozen states. And, it's funny, you get pretty serious people all buttoned up and want to come talk about the robots. And then, 5 minutes later, like, hey, let's do the robot selfie, right? Everyone gets kind of excited about the technology. And some of our clients end up naming the robots and having more of an emotional attachment. So I think it's gone a lot better, frankly, than I expected, because we didn't know if, society, quote unquote, would allow us to do this. But, kids love them, parents love them. There have been kisses left on the robots. Some of them have their own Twitter handles and stuff. It's pretty exciting, and it's interesting to see the human to robot actually bond or attachment.
We've got so many questions coming in, so I'm going to dive right in. From William, he wants to know a little bit about the revenue model. Can you talk about that? Is it recurring? How does it work?
So on the autonomous security robot side, yes, it's a recurring revenue business model, as I mentioned, for a recurring societal problem. So we sign year-long contracts, typically with an automatic renewal. Let's say for K5, which is one of our most popular robots, you're talking $50,000-$60,000 of revenue coming in per annum. And the business model is basically recover as much as we can the cost of the machine in the first year. And then the second, third, fourth, fifth year, as long as you can keep your operating costs really low, that's where you're generating that additional gross margin. So it's, I like to say it's luxury automotive per unit economics, meaning you're kind of buying a new Tesla every year, but the margins over the long term actually mimic and look more like a software as a service company.
And Nora Sims wants to know, who are your customers? Is it individuals, businesses, all of the above?
Half a dozen primary focus: commercial real estate, corporate campuses, some schools, residential, a lot of hospitals, a lot of casinos. And then obviously we're working on the federal government contract. But probably the easier way to answer your question is anywhere you might see an officer or a guard patrolling and sometimes doing the monotonous kind of work is a unique opportunity for Knightscope, including airports like LAX, Lowe's, big retailer, is a client of ours. And, it's continuing to grow.
Sean Armstrong wants to know, how many customers do you currently have, and what do you expect your growth rate to be?
So I think we gave a little bit. We typically don't give guidance because we're at the cutting edge of technology, and trying to predict how this is going to roll out is a little bit difficult, even for a mature company. So I think last quarter, fourth quarter, we said we'd probably be at a $10-12 million run rate. Barring some ongoing supply chain issues, I think we should have a pretty good 2023. Again, to just recap, 21 we did about 3.4 million in revenue, and last year about 5.6. We have dozens and dozens of clients from federal, state, local level, and it's again continuing to grow.
Dewey wants to know, what's your advertising strategy and how are you growing customers?
We've tried a bunch of stuff. Remember, no one in the history of mankind has done this before at scale, like for real. You can look at Bloomberg's analysis of autonomous work, over $100 billion invested in autonomy, 200 plus companies working on it. No one shipped anything, frankly, and the collective revenue of those couple hundred companies close to zero, if not zero. I believe Knightscope's one of the only companies, if not the only company, operating 24/7 across an entire nation, again, generating millions of dollars of revenue. And I think we'll continue to grow that. And can you repeat the question? I didn't have enough coffee this morning. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Just talking about like the advertising strategy and growing customer base.
For a second. The Robot Roadshow has been the most effective for us. If you go to knightscope.com/roadshow, you can see this. I call it affectionately, as I mentioned, Anna, the robot aquarium. And basically, we put this massive glass box with a bunch of robots in it. And what's been most effective is people are zoomed out. You can PowerPoint them to death. You can do video and everything else, which are great to do the initial assessment. You know, what is the problem you have? Do you have budget? Do you have authority? And then do a demo, like a webinar or a virtual kind of session, and then invite them to the Robot Roadshow. And they usually can bring their decision makers with them. And that usually helps close the deal, right? Because you get a chance to touch, see, feel, and experience the technology firsthand. And that's been one of the most unique and most effective ways for us to sell.
Kelly Herman wants to know what differentiates you from your competitors.
Interesting question. We don't have at our scale true competitors just yet. That's the kind of first comment. Second comment, there is one company that has been scaling and we applaud their efforts, has been Cobalt Robotics. It's a private company. They focus mostly indoors only. We're both indoors and outdoors. Third, our stated mission is to make the US the safest country in the world. We'd be highly arrogant and naive to think that we're going to do this by ourselves without our with our shareholders and everything else. We applaud any and everyone's efforts that are working on physical security to help fix the problem. But in terms of running 24/7, generating, last year 5.6 million, and there's no one at our scale and no competitors in the U.S. There are numerous efforts across the globe of university-funded research. There's a couple of companies starting to grow a little bit, but it's very early days.
Cliff Ford wants to know if any of this technology is patent protected.
Don't quote me here. I think we've got a half a dozen to maybe 10 patents. I have my qualms about patents because the technology moves so quickly, and usually a patent's kind of defensive, like you're trying to block someone from doing something. If our stated mission is to make the US the safest country in the world, like you actually have a higher calling than, like, I don't know, a prescription drug, and the formula is kind of that important. So we have the basics covered, but the technology moves so fast that, I know some investors think that it's important. I have my issues with that.
Rodney Beggar wants you to talk about any other applications the technology has and anything for the EV space.
There's a couple of ways to interpret that. So 95% of startups fail. A lot of companies end up trying to chase a shiny object. And I've said it multiple times already. Our mission is to secure the US. Us making a robot to help a nursing home or kitchen or something like that. We're not a robotics company. We're an advanced physical security company with a very clear mission. And so the applications are, again, anywhere indoors or outdoors, you might see an officer or guard patrolling. And that could be a neighborhood. It could be an HOA. It could be a power utility. It could be a water plant, infrastructure, customs and border protection. Think about who secures NASA, their Social Security Administration, or the U.S. Postal Service. I mean, there's a massive, massive amount. If you go to knightscope.com/rise, RISE. You can see you can pull the investor deck there, and you can see the kind of slide that shows the size of the market. I think long term, we've got likely a 30 or $40 billion opportunity. So we try not to stray to other parts of, robotics or what have you.
That makes sense.
Sorry, on the EV side of things, I think one quick answer would be to help with all the EV charging stations coming online to provide some security there, because in some cases, frankly, the EV charging stations aren't always in the best part of town. So that might be an opportunity for us. I think I'll say that medium term.
And Matt Meyerson wants to know, what are the current or future capabilities for proximity detect weapons like guns on a person or in a location?
On the task list, it's technically rather easy to do if, let's say you're at 7-Eleven and you've got a camera above the cashier, perfect lighting, nothing's moving. To detect that weapon is actually kind of easy. The harder part is, let's say it's 4 o'clock in the morning, it's foggy, it's raining, the robot's moving, which means the camera's moving, the foreground's moving, the person or suspect's moving, and you got to go detect that weapon in the middle of the night. That level of AI and machine learning is a lot more difficult. It's actually what our clients are looking for. So we'd rather spend the time to get it right and take a little bit longer than the kind of easy peasy use case.
Tom wants to know, what type of hurdles are you facing to overcome and currently overcoming to have these machines running around the cities? What challenges are you facing?
I think there's two. I'll try to say this politely. The law enforcement, government, and security professions and part of our economy are not the most technologically progressive part of the country. And so there's a lot of teaching, explaining, showing that it can work. So there's a lot of evangelizing and having to spend a lot of time to get someone over and understand that this is not a prototype. It actually works. And I think that's one kind of basic challenge, I guess, a little bit of a market changing challenge. But at some point that'll break, right? Like at some point, you would never build a building today without a smoke detector or a fire alarm. Like you wouldn't be allowed to do it. At some point, there is a shift where you didn't want to pay the $7 an hour to properly secure your property. Like you're going to be found negligent. I think the other one is more internal, is driving us crazy. One of the reasons the backlog is so big is the supply chain. It's just playing whack-a-mole every day with some new issue. And we're working through it, but it's certainly slowing things down. And the ongoing pandemic issues are having its way with us.
Of course. Chris W. wants you to talk about monitoring. How many people are needed to monitor or control these robots?
Great question. So they're fully autonomous. So no different than your home security system. Are you sitting there on your phone monitoring your home all day? No, you're waiting for the alert. So think of it that way. Now, where does that alert go? That alert, 80-90% is going to our clients. Most of them have a 911 dispatch or security operations center, so 24/7 that they're monitoring. For like a community manager at an apartment complex, he or she probably doesn't have a security staff. So we can do that remote monitoring on their behalf for additional revenue, which we call Knightscope Plus. And then the last thing about monitoring is we have a staff that we call the Keynote that monitors all the machines across the country on the health of the machine, making sure that they're charging or there's some issue that, we just put out some new firmware over the air and needs to get updated or what have you. So there's kind of different ways to answer your question, but all covered.
And Robin Pope wants you to talk a little bit about prices. He doesn't see any prices on your site. Where do you sell and what is the price range?
I think if you go to knightscope.com/price,
might find it.
You might find it, or I might be in error. But basically the prices are between as low as 75 cents an hour which is about $6,000 or $7,000 a year, to as high as about $9 an hour. And that's kind of the effective price, just to give you a flavor. And it depends on the type of machine and kind of where you might want to deploy the technology. But it's extremely affordable, which makes it very difficult. And I'm going to make this very painful for people to understand, like, you have no excuse. If your people and your assets are the most important thing in your organization, you're going to have to start answering the question, why are you not using the latest and greatest, most advanced technologies to protect the places that people live, work, study, and visit?
Good point. Ontario McAllister wants to know, what is your churn rate for each model ASR?
So that's a great question, and I'm going to answer it in a way that actually I was right. If you go to knightscope.com/price, you can get a little bit of a flavor there. But the churn rate, in a lot of cases, you need to think about it a little bit differently. So let's say a client engages for a year and then they moved, or frankly, sadly, during COVID, a few people went out of business, or they got a new security director and they changed kind of their process and they canceled it after a year. Some might view that as, oof, you lost the client. But what they don't understand is it's machine as a service. Someone just paid for that robot and all the costs associated with building it. Now we spend, $1,000, $2,000, refurbish it or upgrade it or just clean it up, and we ship it to another client, and now it's generating revenue for us. So we got to really think about churn in a different way. It's, the more machines that we have in network, the better on the revenue side of things, and we can continue to grow the business from there.
He also asks if you have any concerns about the possible delisting with the stock with its recent trading below $1.
Yeah, we actually have two requirements. One is a $50 million market cap, which is the one that we did get a notice from NASDAQ last week. We did not get a notice on the dollar because we traded above and kind of reset the clock. So that starts another 30-day game. I think as the company continues to grow, there are, I suspect, some early shareholders that have been selling significant quantities, which is putting some downward pressure. I also believe that there's things that we don't control, like interest rates and wars and whatever else, and we can worry about that. But as we continue to grow the top line revenue, start delivering on all this backlog, get our costs lower, and start continuing to improve the financial metrics of the company. I think we stated last year that we're targeting to get to profitability here in the next 24 months. I'm hopeful. Obviously, we don't control the stock price, but that's up to the market. And I think that will cure itself. And NASDAQ gives us 180 days to cure the problem. And if we don't cure it in 180 days, likely can appeal for another 180 days. So I'm hopeful that it'll take care of itself.
Okay, great. That's pretty much we have so many more questions. Chris Vetch is a pre-IPO shareholder at $10, and he just wants you to give some closing remarks on insight on the value of the stock and how it will improve when the company is financially sound and growing.
I think it's three things I like to tell investors. One, well, first of all, I'm one of, if not the largest shareholders. I have 7 million shares. I didn't sell a single share at the IPO and don't plan on selling. My entire net worth is in the company. So I don't want you ever thinking kind of what are my thoughts about long-term shareholder value. We are on the same team. We are financially aligned. Second, as I mentioned in the opening remarks, we're at the intersection of 4 of the most important technologies in the world, and literally at the cross section. And it's going to be very difficult for Wall Street to ignore a company that's growing double digit in the middle of AI, autonomy, robotics, and electric vehicles. Like, it's just not gonna happen. I think second, we don't have a market risk. The market for crime is not going to collapse tomorrow, right? 332 million Americans are all going to wake up and start behaving. Like, that's not going to happen. We don't have a technical risk, right? We've proven the technology works. We've operated more than 2 million hours. So now it comes down to execution. And the same management team that willed the company into existence over the last 10 years is still at the helm. And we intend to drive as hard as possible and make the next 10 years as successful. And I told everyone when we started this is hard. You know, the 46 presidents, 200 plus years of history, no one's been able to fix this problem. We're not going to fix this overnight, but we've actually built technology that works, is scaling. And I hope that, you know, typically Wall Street is wrong in the short term, and typically right over the long term. And we intend to make sure that over the long term, we can create significant shareholder value for the entire team. And again, thank you for all our investors that backed us to this day. And hopefully we'll make some new friends and some new supporters so we can reimagine public safety in the US. And as I often say, and will continue to say, long Knightscope and short the criminals.
Wonderful. It's been a joy speaking with you, Bill. I look forward to speaking with you again with some updates. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Anna.
Okay, everyone, stay with us. We'll be right back.